Welcome to the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Dame, holistic nutrition coach and speaker. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode here on the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. I'm so excited for today's guest. Today, we are being joined by Jess Higgins Kelley. Welcome to the show, Jess.
Hey, thanks for having me, Danny. I'm so psyched to be here.
Yes, so excited to have you here as well. And for those who don't know Jess, I want to introduce her quickly. And there's a lot to share here about Jess before we get into an incredible and powerful conversation. But Jess is the founder and director of the Oncology Nutrition Institute. She is an internationally recognized and award-winning journalist, nutrition therapist, and public health educator. She is the best-selling co-author of the groundbreaking book called The Metabolic Approach to Cancer, Integrating Deep Nutrition, the Ketogenic Diet, and Non-Toxic Bio-Individualized Therapies. Jess actually earned an undergraduate degree in journalism from the Western Colorado University and went on to win the Alaska Press Club Award in 2000 for best breaking news coverage of the 9/11 attacks. She served several years as a staff writer for both the Portland Press Herald in Portland, Maine, and the Teton Valley News in Driggs, Idaho. She has been a freelance writer for a variety of publications ever since. Now, in 2010, Jess graduated as a master nutrition therapist from the Nutrition Therapy Institute in Denver, Colorado, and has since worked with hundreds of clients in her general nutrition practice, where she specializes in oncology. That's cancer, people, in case you don't know that. And with her teaching and curriculum development experience, she went on to create what I mentioned earlier, the Oncology Nutrition Institute, where she is currently the director of the 250-hour Oncology Nutrition Consulting certification program that trains qualified nutrition and medical professionals worldwide. That's a lot. You have done a lot. You have learned a lot. And I'm so honored and excited to have you here, Jess. So thank you, everyone, for listening to that. Obviously, you bring a lot of wisdom. And I think this conversation, we'll see where this goes. But I know this is going to be really powerful with everything that you know and you bring.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's start off, Jess, by for those who want to get to know you maybe a little bit better, and I love really starting off with guests this way, especially the first timers on the podcast, is to share a little bit of your backstory. I mean, obviously you've done a lot. You were a journalist, and now you're really into nutrition and nutrition in oncology specifically. You know, what kind of got you into that path? You know, what's your backstory and journey through this?
Yeah. Well, I guess the trail sort of started when I was a kid, and my dad was a respiratory therapist, so he did a lot of home health care. So when I was little, I used to drive around in the oxygen van and go into people's houses and help get them hooked up, to oxygen. And they were still sitting there smoking cigarettes, and it was just like this incredibly powerful insight really early on into the power of addiction and how that translates into all sorts of things, from sugar to food to gambling, all sorts of things. So that was really impactful, I think, at the beginning. And, from there, I went on to get my degree in journalism because I've always loved to write, and I still write and edit books, magazines, and I also spent a lot of time in the outdoor industry. So I worked for Outward Bound teaching leadership and survival skills for a number of years when I was younger. So I really kind of coming into my health journey from sort of the outdoor education portion of health, and noticing that in a lot of outdoor education formats, the food was sort of crapola. So I was like, well, let's try to pull these together, because health is really the fusion of diet and lifestyle. So after a decade in the outdoor industry, my back started to get a little tired, a little old. I went to nutrition school, and that was great. And started a family practice, just consulting company. And so it was great because I saw so many different kinds of people, so many different backgrounds, pediatrics, weight loss, autoimmune, all these different things. And then over time, it was like more and more people who were walking through the door had cancer. And at the time, I was lucky enough to work at this great clinic in Southwest Colorado with Dr. Nisha Winters and Dr. Kirsten West and several other really amazing practitioners. And we were doing some fun stuff with the oncology population. That's really where I started to learn about the metabolic approach, metabolic dietary therapies, and started to integrate them and be like, wow, this works. This is some powerful stuff. And Nisha and I decided to write The Metabolic Approach to Cancer around that time. And the journalist in me was like, yeah, let's do this book. This is going to be so important. In the world of nutrition, cancer has been taboo to talk about. I mean, when I was in nutrition school, it was glossed over. You weren't supposed to talk about it. It was off limits, really. And I'm like, I'm a pirate. I'm like, we'll talk about it. I don't care. We'll put this out there. So the book was going. We were under contract with a publisher, pretty hardy deadline. And then my dad, my respiratory therapy best friend, dad, got diagnosed with glioblastoma multiforme, which is the most aggressive form of brain cancer. And I was like, oh man, this just got really real. Writing this book just got really, it was already important, but now it just got really important for me to get as much information as I could. And so, I mean, everything pointing back, this is 2014, pointing back to metabolic dietary therapies, the ketogenic diet. I mean, this was it. This was the way to go. And so, he integrated this with help, fortunately, from, once a male medical doctor said, yeah, the ketogenic diet's good, then it was good. And it was his idea and it's fine. I'm the black sheep of the family doing, integrative, holistic nutrition. So anyway, during this time while, writing the book, he was going through cancer. The book came out and I was like, let's make this into an education program. So the Oncology Nutrition Institute was born and sort of as an offshoot of the book. And now we have students in over 20 different countries, a lot of medical doctors who are learning about the power of therapeutic and metabolic oncology nutrition. And it's been a great ride. And here we are.
Wow. 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 Here you are. And wow, what divine timing to already be in that process with the book and the studying, the learning, and then being able to apply that with your dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was
Wow.
intense, it was intense because at the end, with that type of cancer, it was sort of, as I put it, you get sent out to pasture and, it was sort of like, what do I do now? And it was a lot of pressure, as a daughter, but also a practitioner. There was a lot to it. So, it's
Yeah.
been just a deep emotional journey for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And so important what you're doing because, and maybe you can speak a bit more to this, but I just want to remind the audience, right, that I think most of us kind of I understand by now that most doctors, right, never get any education in nutrition. There's no understanding of the importance of actually what we put in our body. And I'm curious actually to know more of the specifics in what you see and even oncology departments in hospitals and chemotherapy support. And, what I know about hospitals, right, is they've always got you hooked up to a banana bag of like liquid glucose, right? Just trying to feed you jello and like constantly feeding
Yeah.
this junk, right? Whether it's the seed oils, the sugar, and all this stuff that is supposed to apparently help you heal. But what? How? So yeah, maybe you can speak a little bit to like what you've seen, in terms of, and I think this is just really important for people to understand, anyone out there who's touched by cancer. I think we all are at this point, whether it's ourselves or family members, going to a traditional, going to the hospital, trusting, what the doctors are giving you and what the nurses are trying to shove down your throat, and maybe speak a little bit to what you've learned in terms of the types of foods that should be eaten and shouldn't be eaten, especially if you have a diagnosis, let alone obviously want to prevent cancer.
Yeah, there's a lot sort of within that as far as where to start. So,
Yeah.
I think, and I will just say, I'm not a doctor, I'm not an oncologist. Everything I say is just, education only. And I am not a clinician. I've never worked in a hospital setting. So we're more focused on sort of where your food is coming from and sustainable supply chains instead of, and then hopefully that what I call sort of the supply chain to health that starts with the soil, goes to the farmer, gets distributed all the way up. The hospitals and the big schools and nursing homes, they're at the end of this supply chain of food that's really, by the time it gets there, it's pretty toxic. These are businesses, these are corporations, they want to keep the bottom line. So investing, we just went through our budget. We spend so much money on healthy food. It's triple our mortgage. And so these hospitals, there's not really incentive for them financially to add in therapeutic foods. So, what we see, and definitely the tide's changing here. We're seeing a lot more hospitals looking to integrate, some more farm to table, some more healthier options. But, standard run of the mill, I mean, it's laughable. You're like, these foods that are available in clinical settings are purely designed with calories in mind, and it's not with nutrition. So that's sort of the disconnect between sort of the traditional dietitian, what their training is in a clinical hospital setting versus, nutrition therapy, which is more of the holistic naturopathic approach to nutrition. So, you're getting Jello, when you look at the menu, it's just toxic, sugar laden garbage. And so, we have always encouraged people to bring their own food to the hospital. I know I have fortunately not spent a lot of time in hospitals, but when I went to have a baby, I walked in with like coolers and a whole kitchen blenders. You can bring your own food into the hospital, unless you're in one of those, really tight really immune deficiency departments. They're careful with what comes in, but for a general inpatient, you can get food in. So I think it's just kind of back to the self-reliant, do your own, pack your own, bring your own food in, because what you're going to get in the hospital is probably not what we need, on the back end of surgery. And that's usually when people in the oncology setting are spending the most time in a hospital setting is, before and after surgical procedures. So, that's just where I'll start with, I can't comment too much on the actual food programs within hospitals, but we certainly aim to change that. And it starts with, the food preparation, the dietitians, all the people. It's a systemic change that needs to happen, and we hope that it does. So,
yeah. It's a massive undertaking, and I'm so grateful for everyone who's in this world, trying to making that difference one step at a time, right? It's big. So what are you seeing then, like the second half sort of that question? We've heard this concept, right? Sugar feeds cancer. So maybe you can speak to that a little bit. Like, does sugar cause cancer? Does it feed cancer? Like, what's going on? And you can speak obviously to the metabolic piece there. And then on the other side, what are the sort of dietary guidelines that you're following that actually support in oncology? If somebody is dealing with a diagnosis, like what are some of the things that they can do? Is it a keto diet? Is it a carnivore diet? Is it eating lots of carrots? Like what is it that you're seeing and really, recommending to people who are maybe navigating something like that?
Yeah. So great question. Of course. I mean, this is the $1 million question that everyone's gotten, like, sugar cancer, it's like boom, 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 boom. And where we have to realize is that cancer is a collection of over 200 different diseases. It is so multifaceted, and there are so many different contributors to the cancer process that we can't just say it's that. It's that. So that was kind of the big part of our book, was that, hey, here's 10 different areas of your terrain that can contribute to a cancer process. And of course, sugar being one of them. Altered metabolism is a recognized hallmark of cancer. And so cancer cells, basically what they found in a very simplistic way to describe it is that cancer cells have a different metabolism than healthy cells. So healthy cells breathe oxygen, essentially to create energy. Cancer cells ferment to create energy. They have a totally different energy creation pathway that you're like, why do they do it that way? It's very odd. It's very ancient. It goes back to sort of a bacterial pathway. Okay. So cancer cells don't have the metabolic flexibility to switch gears to run on ketones versus running on glucose. Cancer cells really like glucose. It's easy fuel, okay? They can use it really easy. So it's like as they're creating their energy, they're hungry for glucose. They upregulate the amount of sugar that they can consume, which is pretty fascinating. So it's definitely a preferred fuel source. It's what they crave, right? So when our normal modern day diets are carbohydrate, glucose heavy, it's very advantageous for cancer cells. It is not often that we produce ketones. So ketones get produced in our body as a result of eating a high fat diet or from fasting. So when our bodies have the ability to produce this alternative fuel source for a very good reason. So we used to go in and out of ketosis all the time, but in modern day living, we don't. So why ketones or fat burning fuel is a great strategy for prevention and management of cancer is that cancer cells are like, ketones, I can't do as much with you as I can with glucose. You're not sustaining my frenzied growth as much as that glucose does. And so it destabilizes cancer cells. So ketones destabilize a cancer cell, it slows them down, and it makes it so that other therapeutics can come on board, be it chemotherapy, be it radiation, being it any other type of immunotherapy standard of care. Great. We've seen positive effects from surgery, all sorts of different things. Being in a ketogenic state and being more, cancer cells are just, they're weakened. Okay. So I'm not saying that glucose is the only fuel source for cancer. So recent research has found that cancer cells can also use amino acids, which are proteins. They can also use fatty acids. Okay. They're like dumpster divers is what I call cancer cells. They're like, give me anything. But glucose is like, booyah, it's a taking a squirt of fuel and putting it on the fire for them. Okay. So that's really the role that glucose plays. It is not the end all be all fuel. If it was, we would have cured cancer a long time ago. There's a lot of other factors at play. So does sugar feed cancer? I mean, it's going to help fuel it for sure. There's no doubt about it. The research has shown yes. But it's not the only thing. So just to quantify it there, everyone got, and I think what's happened as a result of that is that people have gotten really afraid of food. So we see people who walk in and they're like living on cream cheese and milk. And it's like, no. We have to really be thoughtful around the kind of therapeutic diets that people get going on because they're become afraid of things like broccoli. Right. And carbohydrates and things like that. So, okay, so that sort of brings us to the second part of your question, which is like, okay, so what do you eat? And, I think for starters, in the 15 years that I've been researching and writing and practicing and teaching about nutrition, we spend so much time being like, well, let's talk about your carbohydrates and your fats and your proteins and your minerals and your micronutrients. And let's talk about all this. And it's like, gets really confusing and overwhelming. And what we really need to do is to sort of take a step backwards and put ourselves in the position of the patient. And that's a big part of what we teach. It's the person, not the protocol. So everybody, their journey to get to their spot is so different than anybody else's. So we have to be like, okay, what are you eating? What are you drinking? How are you living? Are you exercising? Are you this? There's a whole picture of a person before we can be like, and here's the diet for you. It's all bio-individual, right? So I like to put that out there first because especially in our world in nutrition, there's so many people who get into this diet dogma that's like, it's keto, it's keto, it's keto. You're like, oh, it's plant-based, it's plant-based. It's like, we're like square peg, round hole, one therapeutic dietary modality. And I think that that's shooting us in the foot because everybody's different. So we really have to take that into account when we're working with with any population. It's the person, not the protocol. But there are a few foundational things that people really need to focus on. And my big thing is to make sure that it's affordable, that it's accessible, and that you can easily integrate it, right? Because a lot of this alternative healthcare, it's like, it's expensive. You know, people are like, I got to meet with a nutritionist. Insurance doesn't cover it. You know, it's like, that's crap and that should change. But, you know, the place that I really want everyone to get started is being properly hydrated. And I love this because it is so simple. And because it's so simple, it gets overlooked all the time. And proper hydration is so key on so many levels. And the number one is that our mitochondria, their health depends on water. Mitochondrial function depends on proper hydration. And there is no other nutrient that is required by the body in the amounts and the frequency as water is. We can only live without water for like 3 days, 4 days. It's the only nutrient that we need in large amounts. And so I think, you know, there's so many different things and it can be overwhelming, but just, you know, just sort of start there as a baseline for people to start really being conscious. And I think, you know, you'll find as you work with your clients, with your patients, you know, a lot of clinicians, if you say, hey, how's your hydration? 9 times out of 10, people are going to be like, oh, I could really do better about that. Oh, I could really do better. And you're like, yeah, I'm sure you've heard it a ton, right?
All the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, drinking water is a great place. It's the baseline. So I can go on from there about other foods to eat.
Yeah, I'm curious if the other pieces, like even specifically, I know that you talk about keto and you talk about obviously like a low sugar, higher fat diet. Like, are you seeing really good results with that? You know, for anybody listening, you know, I want, you know, to empower them to know that there are options. And I really want to appreciate, and I operate in the same way with helping my clients get off sugar and navigate that. It is really the person, not the protocol, right? Like, we are all so unique. So if, you know, I can eat nothing but kale all day, for an example, right? But you can, every time you eat kale, you get bloated and feel exhausted, right? Like, your body doesn't do kale, right? So we can blanket statement this, like, everybody should eat this thing, or everybody, I'm using kale and quinoa as an example because that was a big fad that we all went through, right? Like, everybody needs to eat quinoa. But that's not the case, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, I think from a nutrition perspective, sort of as we go along, an importance of, you know, an anti-cancer diet, looking at the most important foundational nutrients. So after we get someone properly hydrated from non-toxic sources, you know, we have people figure out if they're on a well, are they getting exposed to, you know, heavy metals or glyphosate in their well water? Are they drinking out of plastic water bottles? Let's get rid of those because of the BPA. Let's get water filled. I mean, there's just so many things we can just, you could spend an hour talking to a client about water and what it does. Anyway, beyond water, the next really key thing that you could live on really for a very long time is the essential fatty acids, EPA and DHA. And these come from fish oils. These are these preformed omega-3 fatty acids that are anti-inflammatory. They're critical for your brain and neurological health. They're sort of, we can live on a ketogenic diet for a long time, right? We can thrive on a ketogenic diet for a long time. And the key to a healthy ketogenic diet is anti-inflammatory fats. And those anti-inflammatory fats, and that's what I said earlier, you know, we see people on these junk food keto diets that are like, fat bombs, keto, you know, just non-organic dairy products. And you're like, well, that's maybe not going to be the best approach. You know, let's try get some nutrient density on here. So let's talk about the EPA and the DHA. These come from fish oils and marine sources. And a huge thing that I'm seeing now in the, you know, health claim world, it's like plant-based omega-3s. Get your omega-3s from flax. You cannot get preformed EPA and DHA from flax seeds. They have to convert through different enzymatic processes, of which there are genetic SNPs, like that are very important. The FADS2 SNP, that if people have these fatty acid desaturated SNPs, they may not be converting these plant-based omega-3s into these preformed DHA EPA. So this is another, kind of glaring danger of these plant-based diets that are coming out. We're totally there's no regard for nutrition science there. So fish. So let's get good, clean fish from clean waters, from Alaska, from Maine, where I live. Supporting these fishermen, it's a big part of food. So healthy fish, marine sources, EPA, DHA. These EPA and DHA can also come from pasture raised beef. So they've done studies that have found that meat that, the CAFO meat that are live in feedlots, and, they get fed genetically modified plastic. I mean, for crying out loud. And they've got hormones and all these are super fun sight animals. I wrote it in the book. It's like this, you shouldn't eat those.
Yeah.
The cows that have been grazing in the United States and North America, like buffalo, on grasses that have been around for thousands of years. They've done studies and they've compared the nutrient content of both of these different kinds of animals. And of course, the cows that are out grazing, getting sun, eating diets that are natural to them, their content of these anti-inflammatory EPA, DHA higher. Okay. So very important to think about these high quality anti-inflammatory fat food sources. So if you can get some of those on board, then the next thing would be some, what I call low carbohydrate, high phytonutrient foods. So these are going to be things like herbs. So everyone should have some basil growing in their windowsill right now, some parsley. They're nutrient dense, they're highly powerful, they're extremely low carbohydrate. I mean, I could fill this whole room with basil and I wouldn't even get like 20 carbohydrates. I mean, you can really go big on a lot of these, what I call anti-cancer plant families. So mushrooms are so important. Sea vegetables, your seaweeds, your allium family, onions, garlic, chives, leeks. These are so powerful. Okay. The cruciferous family, really great if you've got some hormone challenges going on. Broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. These are good. They do so much for your microbiome. And so fiber, the fiber factor, it's like water, fat, fiber. If you can focus on those three things, you're golden. I mean, you're really, and fasting, I should throw it's the F word day, but that's where typically we start and build off of.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so powerful. Thank you for sharing all of that. Yeah, that's really interesting that about beef and being able, like, obviously the massive quality difference. And I'm sitting here thinking, I feel so lucky. We just got our whole cow delivered. Our freezers are full we have a friend who raises it for us, and it's like loved like a pet, and it just like lives the best life. And I'm feeling so honored and lucky to have access to that, while knowing that a lot of people don't have access to that. Right. So like you said, it is trying to find that balance. Not everything is accessible, whether it's financial constraints or location and all those pieces. Okay, I want to come back to the water piece, because I think that's really fascinating and something that I was nodding along with you, because every one of my clients is like, I need to drink more water. It's like a constant goal, right? Of like, I suck at drinking water. There's water in coffee, right? Like all that. There's water in wine. So I'm curious, like, do you see a link? Well, first of all, like, what link is there between maybe like hydrating, making sure we're getting enough water, and actually the possibility of even contributing to not only disease development, but even sugar cravings? A lot of my listeners, here struggling daily with sugar cravings, right? And these drives to binge. Like, is there a link there? Have you seen a connection?
Oh, there is absolutely a connection. So, like I said, so even a small amount, like as little as 2% dehydrated, because water is required so much by the body, you start to see these subtle signs come up within hours, if not a day or two. So when some of the first signs of dehydration is hunger, is craving.
Mm.
Your brain uses so much water. So that is going to be really powerful. So we do see right away, we see cravings. We also see fatigue. So people who are they're just a little tired. They're a little out of juice. Remember, your mitochondria uses the molecular structure of water to create ATP. So you're going to get, and when you're tired, you're like, I got to be on a podcast in 5 minutes. I need energy, So you crave sugar, like your little pick-me-ups. So we become addicted. So these little pick-me-ups like sugar or coffee or energy drinks or whatever people get going on, that's going to give him that little jolt. One of the other big things that we see in dehydration right out of the gate is poor cognitive function. And this is especially important in the pediatric population. So we see, a lot of people, I can't focus. I can't pay attention. I'm all over the place. We're dehydrated. And it's so simple. And we need to be talking about this, and we need to be making sure that everybody is drinking enough water. So you just imagine all night long you're respirating. So that's a big contributor to becoming dehydrated. You breathe oxygen out. It's got some water in it. The other contributors to dehydration is as people get older, they lose that hunger sensation. So this is, again, with the pediatrics, we see it, and with the elderly population, we see it. So the dementia, the confusion, the Alzheimer's, some of these neurocognitive effects that we see in people. I have colleagues who have been working in nursing homes, and they say, you give these people some water? I mean, it's not like they're jumping out of their seats, but in some cases they are. So it's like we need to make sure that our very young and our very old is where we really see these things coming, pronounced type of cognitive and definitely craving. It's really interesting. There was one study that they found, and this is in humans, that when they drank like 500 milliliters of water, their metabolic rate increased by 30% for the sort of the hour following. So when it comes to weight loss, drinking some water, it revs you up. It's putting fuel on your fire. Your mitochondria are like, sweet, I got what I need to do what I got to do. So it's so powerful. So, one of the first sort of things that we have people do if they're getting hungry, you can, first of all, tuning into your body and being like, hi, are you talking to me? If you feel a craving coming on, it's drink some water. It's like, are you really hungry? Because it's amazing. So it's like, okay, so if I've got my water bottle here, or this is what I drink out of in a day, and you're like, let's pound it, pound some water. It is amazing. You can break through so many of these cravings just by doing some water. And, I like to use water as sort of a vehicle, as it is, for sort of some herbs like Gymnema sylvestre, which also has put a little tincture, like this thing is filled with all sorts of lotions and potions and tinctures and stuff. That can help reduce sugar cravings.
Yeah.
And so if you've got some of these powerful things that are in just your water bottle, along with some electrolytes, people might go, because a lot of people are deficient in electrolytes because they're really not found in a lot of, water bottles, tap water, that kind of thing. Once you start nourishing your body with the electrolytes you need, some blood sugar, or, controlling herbs, even like a little dash of some cinnamon extract in your water. The results are amazing. Most people, when they get hydrated, they lose 5 pounds like nothing. And because obesity is one of the main contributors to cancer, it's just getting people to lose weight. And that's the other thing, is that when people go into their doctor, they've done studies. 1 in 3 people will ask their oncologist, oh, geez, I've been diagnosed with cancer. What should I eat? And the most common answer is, it doesn't matter. Eat whatever you want. Just don't lose weight.
Wow.
And it's like,
what?
I'm not kidding. This is the most common answer that we hear
Wow.
all the time. Don't lose weight. So we're getting there.
What?
So we have a
Why?
very,
Wait. Why are there doctors out there telling their patients not to lose weight?
well, for good reason, actually, because
Okay.
cachexia, which is the like a muscle wasting inflammatory process that actually kills the majority of cancer patients. It's a runaway truck of dysregulated metabolism and inflammation. You know, when we associate a cancer patient with like emaciated and bald and they're like withering away, you know, if that's not checked, which the ketogenic diet, by the way, has been found to be protective against cachexia, those people die quickly. And so medical oncologists who have not been trained in nutrition are like, we don't want that. And we don't want
Right.
that. So it's not eat whatever you want. It's let's eat a therapeutic diet. We need to change that conversation, because this is the first interface that most cancer patients have with asking about nutrition. And this is the message that they're getting. And so it's been great to train practitioners who are in these clinical settings to be like, you know, that's, I mean, I'm not a doctor, but it doesn't take a brain scientist to know that that's just a stupid answer. And to me, that's malpractice, because if, as a nutritionist, doctors are like, don't, make sure you use the correct wording, make sure you don't say this, make sure you don't say that. But then these doctors are giving advice that's like poisonous. Give me a break. That's malpractice. And I
Yeah.
feel like we need to have a stronger voice against what's coming out to these people when, you know, intuitive, we're like, what can, you know, I probably should do something to sort of help myself get healthier. And the most common thing that comes to your mind is like, well, geez, I had McDonald's for breakfast this morning, and that probably wasn't that good. You know,
Right.
let's
Right.
let's give these people something.
Yeah.
So
Oh, I love it. Thank you for sharing that. And your passion clearly comes through. I share that with you. I think there's so much that we need to do. And, you know, why are you're not allowed to say certain things out of your realm of expertise? So why are they saying things outside of their realm of expertise, right? Around the nutrition piece. I don't know anything about. So exactly why you're doing what you do with the Oncology Institute. And so, yeah, just so potently powerful and important. Yeah. And yeah, I just wanted to, you know, shine that light on and share that I see that exactly in my practice as well with my clients with the hydration piece. So many of my clients, right, mix up, and you mentioned just quickly there, but I think that's so important because it's something I'm really passionate about talking about on the podcast, is how crazy disconnected we've all become from our bodies, right? So there's this just one layer of that being like, we can't even tell the difference between I'm hungry, I need nutrients, and my body needs water, right? And I'm thirsty. So that's where that first line of defense for people who are still disconnected from their bodies to hit the water first. And oftentimes your hunger, you know, whether it's a craving for something sweet or actual hunger, will dissipate. And you go, oh, I guess I was just dehydrated, right? And you know, it's really fascinating when we start to kind of see that. Yeah, so that's important.
yeah. I mean, we can live on water alone. The longest recorded fast, the Guinness Book of World Records, was 1 year and 17 days. It was a medically supervised, and it was in Ireland. And this guy just was like, I am morbidly obese and I want to lose some weight. And he lived on water and lost all that
Wow.
weight. And, you know, I think we can make nutrition really complicated, especially in the cancer landscape. But, you know, some of the best, you know, advice is, you know, if you're not hungry, don't eat. Just, you know, just fasting.
Yeah.
Fasting for weight loss, getting down to a good weight is the one of the most important things. And we're sort of normalizing obesity and making it like
Yeah.
accepted. It's like normalizing smoking cigarettes and being like, you know what? Yeah, it's great. It's cool. Smoke, you know, it's like, you know what?
Right.
It's not okay. And we shouldn't be normalizing some of this stuff, because some of it is a big problem. So I think by just getting back to just, you know, getting hydrated, people lose some weight, and that reduces your cancer risk significantly. So, yeah, I think going back to just sort of some of these basics to get people more connected, and, you know, that is the nutrition piece, and circling back to that emotional piece. So, you know, for years I've taught, you know, how to develop a good intake form, you know, when you're getting to know your person, because that's really what it's all about. Instead of being like, here you are, patient number 65, and you get this and this and this. Like, no, like, I'm a journalist, you know, I like to get to know people. I want to know their story and like the juicy stuff. And one of the questions that we always ask is, what do you think contributed to your cancer process? Why do you think you got cancer? I'm like, you can
Yeah.
just ask that one question right there and just kind of let it go. And it's so, because most people will be like, I know it's out of bounds. And then you're like, well, we're going to start right there, because that, people forget that the body has this incredible ability to heal itself. All of healing comes from within. When you break an arm, it's not the cast that heals it, it's your osteoclast and all the things that heal that bone, right? So it's not pharmaceuticals, it's not chemotherapy. We don't have a deficiency in any of those things. We have a deficiency in water, and we have a deficiency in emotional health and
Yeah.
exercise.
Yeah.
And
Yes. Okay. This is turning into like a part 2 of this episode, because I want to ask you a question that may take us down a road, because this is an area that I'm very fascinated about. I know we've been talking a lot about nutrition, and I'm curious, perhaps you don't know much around this realm, but I'm very fascinated with my studying and the way that I'm taking my business and work into somatics and into trauma and nervous system regulation, and this understanding of I think it's Gabor Mate that's talked about studies where almost every cancer patient that they studied had people pleasing tendencies, like had never once stood up for themselves, never once expressed an emotion, never once truly authentically allowed themselves the joy of being who they are. And like some of these very common coping mechanisms and sort of what I would call trauma patterns that we kind of live with in our society, combined with the stress, the McDonald's, the dehydration, all the things that you're talking about, of course, as well. It's never one thing, but I'm curious if you come across that, or if you've seen any maybe patterns in the clients that you work with around the energetic imprint and around perhaps their childhood or the way that they live or don't live their life.
mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Oh,
So
okay,
this
we're going there.
Oh yeah, this is so cool. I say, we do nutrition therapy. 90% of it is therapy. So
Yeah.
90% of it. You can like so many years and years and years of like, okay, let's talk about your early childhood trauma. Let's talk about your toxic marriage. Let's talk about your abuse. Let's talk about all this stuff that bothered you, as a child that you really never dealt. Because you get these people on the phone and they're like, they just want to vomit their story and get it out, and they should and they need to. And a lot of times our role as the practitioner is to just give them the space to release and get some of this out. And early childhood traumas are linked to all sorts of different diseases down the line. I mean, there's so much data there and so much research, and the more early childhood traumatic events that we experience, adverse events, the more your risk of certain diseases go up. And that, because it goes to how our brains process. And the other thing is that everybody perceives differently. So, back in ancient times when we would take into account disease alongside personality types, this is, ancient Greek medicine. You can take two people and have them have the exact same experience, and one person, it's totally traumatic for, and the other person's like, whatever, that wasn't a really big deal. Some people are really sensitive to life events. Some people have had some really awful shit happen to them, and they have never had anybody talk to them about it. I have heard stories of abuse and trauma, and I mean, it's unbelievable what people go through. And of course it manifests because, in the book The Body Keeps Score, there's cellular memory, and if we don't address that, there's no keto diet in the world that is going to touch what's happening in those cells. And of course you could get into the cellular memory of water molecules and that whole road, but trauma is everything, and dealing with that part of it is huge. And that personality type, we call it the type C personality, it's the, hey, I got it, oh, I'll do it, I'm fine, everything's
Yeah.
great. And you're like shoving your emotions into a sausage casing years and years and years, and you're not being like being your authentic true self. And that shows up, whether it be, breast cancer, ovarian cancer. Women, it's a lot of times our reproductive, our kind of womanly parts that start to show up. You start to see personality associated with different cancers. You can definitely start to see a trend. Our digestive colon cancer folks, these are the folks that can't let stuff go. The breast cancer stuff for the nurturers that had their, maybe, on the left side, they had their heart broken by something, left boob, right boob. What's going on in our bodies? It's a messenger. Our bodies can't talk per se, but you'll start to get symptoms, and those symptoms are starting to show up younger and younger. So we're seeing, unfortunately, cancer in younger and younger audiences. And I think that that's because we have we don't have a lot of conversation around emotions. So around how to express emotions, feel emotions, what are emotion? We're not sitting around the fire talking about our periods anymore. So these young girls are like, what is this? Who am I? What's going on? Where do I connect and where do I fit? And what does this all mean? And because we've lost so much of this connection to our bodies and the planet, we're kind of a mess. So I think it's really, it's so powerful. And what I really tell a lot of our consultants is their students, they want to go technical with looking at genetic pathways and SNPs. And we teach all that. And it's really important. But the key piece is to get the emotional landscape of a person and understand, like, hey, is there anything you want to talk about? We have people, I love when clients just write like, Dear Diary, let me tell you everything that happened in my life that affected me, a car accident or a breakup, or you can get the whole intake form can be, what do you think caused your cancer, and tell me your story. And that's it, because those emotions are huge, just like, and that's just such a big part of it. So yeah.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Okay. We're going to have you back and have more of that conversation, because personally, that's just so fascinating to me, and exactly why, I'm getting more into more somatic work, more body-based work, more, understanding trauma, nervous system regulation underneath even just addictive patterns. Right. But in disease development, we know now, and science is finally studying it for people who need that. I have no problem believing in the woo-woo stuff and stories that I've heard, but some people need the science. So it's nice that we have a bit of both showing up. And I'm really glad that you mentioned that emotional piece. That's a big passion of mine, and a big piece of work that I do with my clients is relearning how to feel again and to feel safe feeling, because there's an imprint there. It's not safe to show emotions, right? We've come out of those generations, right, where we need to switch that pattern and switch that belief to live more fully and live more authentically. And yeah, there's so much we can do. So we'll chat more about that. But I want to, I want to ask one more question. I know we're going a little bit over time here, but I think this is really important for those who are listening to this, coming back to obviously this more specific cancer conversation, who maybe have family members who are going down a bad path, or perhaps have been diagnosed with some form of diagnosis here, but are maybe have just indoctrinated by the whole old way of thinking, and maybe not open to this nutritional conversation of, hey, here's all the things we can do. Right? Like how do you begin to maybe broach that subject with someone who's, we'll just say, closed-minded, for lack of a better word, or who is not aware of the importance of nutrition? Obviously, they're not getting that information from their doctor or their oncologist, right? But anyone who's listening to this episode that has a loved one who's possibly struggling and needs this. I mean, obviously, number one, share this podcast episode with them. But, do you have any advice there? Have you seen, how do you see loved ones deal with that, or start maybe planting the seeds for someone who may not be aware that they can actually save their life, right? And they can actually do some really big healing with nutrition, and obviously the emotional piece too. But
gosh, Danny, you're asking me these questions that could take like a half an hour to explain.
I know. Okay.
Real quick, for the sake of time. Number one, working with friends and family is extremely challenging. People need to be open to let this stuff come in. And for years and years and years, I've been like, oh my gosh, you just got diagnosed with, let me tell you this and this and this. And people are like, definitely don't care.
Right.
Definitely not there, not going to do it. And that is okay. So it's hard as a caregiver to be like, oh my gosh, we have all this information and you're not going to plug in. And that's just sort of, if someone is not open, I think it's important to maybe say, hey, look, there's a ton of research if you want to integrate some other things. Of course, my book, The Metabolic Approach to Cancer, I think is great to give to them because it's got over 200 citations. And, just start reading. There's a Cosmo quiz that we give people that's from the book. It's available on our website to just start going through to just get people kind of a little bit more aware of, what could be going on with their digestion or their hormones or all these different things. It's just a nice little way to get people to be like, huh, that was interesting. I never thought about that. So, I think, because I felt like a woodpecker against a tree for so many years to try to get people to be open to this. You have to kind of start with their oncologist. So you can be pecking at their tree, but we need to hear it. They need to hear it from their doctors. The
Yeah.
trusted, that is who they trust. And that is where most people will go to first, and they are scared. They're like, oh, I'm not ready to go outside the box just yet because I really need to trust my oncologist because I'm probably going to die. You're like, okay, I'm not ready to hear about other things right now. So what's really great is to start with if you have just a handout, we train all of our students with just to cite research speaks. Research
Yeah.
speaks the language. So our students have to cite all of their handouts. We have to speak in research, and that's the only way we're going to get through. So if maybe hand a loved one a recent peer-reviewed double-blind placebo, which is what people need and what it seems
Right.
that we need to validate this stuff and say, hey, look, I just came across this study about hydration. If you feel comfortable, share it with your oncologist and see what they think, so that the patient is going in and starting to educate the oncologist. So it's a patient-driven movement. So if a patient has these tools and this education, that they can start, hey, let me talk to my oncologist about it. If your oncologist says there's no data about nutrition, you shouldn't be doing anything at all, find a new oncologist. Absolutely, your oncologist works for you. So find a new one. If they are not open, get them out of there.
Yeah.
Okay. The other oncologists will say, I don't really know what you're doing, but it seems like it's working. So keep going. And they want to learn. Doctors are good doctors. They want to learn. They should be wanting to learn. They should want this information. So, be like, hey, maybe you want to share this with your oncologist and see if they can get in. And it's a good way to sort of interview your oncologist to see if they're open or they're savvy with any of this stuff too. But people really need to be talking to their doctors about it first and foremost, and trying to find a doctor. If they want that MD, PhD, blah, 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 all the D's and the M's in the world, those people need to be able to speak this language. So find those
Yeah.
ones.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a good point. That's the same approach, same advice I give with sugar, right? And with wanting people that you love to stop eating McDonald's for breakfast, like you talked about earlier. It's tricky when it often can't come from us. And in this world, especially with oncology and that fear of death being so in the face,
Yeah.
I really appreciate that advice. Like, it needs to come from someone that person trusts, and it might not be you, right? Because you're not the medical doctor in the family, perhaps, right? So they
But
might
we're,
not take your
yeah,
thoughts. Yeah. So that having the research and the study, I love that. Obviously your book is going to be an incredible
yeah,
resource, and your website for that. And I'll make
yeah.
sure all those links, by the way, everybody, are definitely in the show notes. So you can go and check out more of what Jess is doing, and perhaps the ask to pass that along to any oncologist that you know, right? Anyone who needs to know more about nutrition, and the training program that you have is absolutely incredible.
Right. And, the training program is really for these medical doctors that didn't get it. They didn't get it in school. So get it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not too late. It's never too late, right? What's that? Like the saying. It's never too late. Yeah. And that's if you're a patient or a doctor, right? There's so much that we can learn here. And thank you, Jess, for hanging out a little bit longer and letting me ask those questions. I have so many more that I want to ask, but I will hold off and just share so much gratitude for coming on the show today and sharing everything with us. I'm feeling really like inspired, and excited to continue this path and continue learning. And really, really just grateful for you being here.
Thank you. Thanks for all the work you're doing too. It's wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. All right, everyone. We will see you on the next episode. And I hope that you got a lot out of this, just like I did. And please, as I mentioned a minute ago, if any of this resonates with you, or if you know someone who is feeling lost on their cancer journey and like there's no other options for them, perhaps send them this episode, send them Jess's book, right? And plant those seeds for them and let them know that there is other options. And there's so much that we can do when we get out of the way and allow our body to heal from the inside out. So yeah, wonderful. All right, everyone. Thanks for being here. We'll see you on the next one. Thank you for tuning in to another episode. If you're loving what we talked about today, please remember to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone you love. And if you're ready to dive deeper into discovering your root causes and patterns that are keeping you hooked on sugar, be sure to check out our brand new free workshop series that will help you kick emotional eating for good. Find the link to download this free series and other amazing resources in the show notes below.